What are the chances of a Category 5 hurricane forming in the Gulf of Mexico, moving east to Tampa? And because of where hurricanes usually form, it was a 0.1% chance per year. You have to say to yourself, well, the odds, I don't know for sure, but the odds suggest that weather manipulation may have been employed. You just got to be a critical thinker and say, I don't know for sure, but this is just weird. These two things would happen 30 days out from one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Wouldn't it be interesting if, like, 3 weeks out from the election, they decided to declare a national climate emergency because of these two current events that we're seeing with these hurricanes? They already floated the issue. It's already been talked about. So this isn't conspiracy theory. And if they do,
yeah, Ed, it's been over a year since we caught up. Like I was saying before we hit record, I'm very happy that we're catching up now. What are we, 30 days out till election, less than 30 days. And I don't know, it seems like we have parallel things running in track. Like almost like the Great Awakening is happening at the same time that the incumbent dystopian power structure is trying to hold on to that power. Like it seems like a lot is being revealed or admitted. You had fluoride in the water, the government coming out and overtly admitting that it's dumbing down the population and lowering children's IQs, emissions about COVID and all the insanity. It seems like the Democratic Party is also having some internal turmoil, and you have Biden pitted against Kamala. It's insane right now. What are your thoughts as all this is going down?
well, it's good to be here, and it's gotten crazier as time's gone on. We still live in this, like you said, we live in two parallel realities. Those who are awakening to truths, and those who are still asleep in a normalcy bias that is just, at this point, I don't even know how you can't see what's going on, especially with your own health. Some of these people keep getting sick. Their loved ones around them are getting turbo cancers, heart attacks, musculoskeletal issues, neurological issues, and they just think it's all normal. It's insane.
It really is. But on the other side of the token, it does seem like there's this awakening. I mean, like Maha. I mean, last time we spoke, RFK was still in the running. A lot of things have happened, obviously, since last July, one of which being that RFK has come out and joined the Trump ticket and throwing his support behind Trump. You've got Tulsi Gabbard throwing her support as well. And I mean, obviously with Maha, one of the big things is like make America healthy again. It's like this conversation that has been forced to the background for many years, which is the fact that our food system and medical pharmaceutical systems are making us woefully sick. Seems to be like a popular thing. You have Callie Means and others going on Joe Rogan. You have hearings on Capitol Hill of individuals holding up cereal saying this is poisoning our children. And all this is to say, it feels like this election is a crazy inflection point where we can go one way or the other, triple, quadruple down on incompetence, or maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel and start sprinting towards the light.
No, I agree. Look, it's good news what's going on. There's a lot. People are waking up faster than we've ever seen. However, if you look at the regime, it wants to stay in power. And they literally came out this week and have said, we must shut down free speech to save democracy. So we're at a critical inflection point where all the tricks are going to be pulled out of the bag to, try to steal the election, stop the election, whatever it is. And I expect, we got hurricanes hitting, we got Israel bombing cities. That's kind of gone under the radar, in Syria today and Lebanon. And they're talking about going and blowing up nuclear sites in Iran. That's all under the radar. We got the Federal Reserve and Janet Yellen trying to hold up the stock market into the election. It's the manipulation and fraud is blatant. The last payroll numbers that came out on Friday were a joke. 785,000 government jobs, the highest on record. It just gave people jobs so they could paint a number. We're at the end game, and it's good news and bad news. The good news is more people are waking up, so there's a lot of hope. The bad news is the dying regime will pull out all the stops, in my humble opinion.
Well, digging into the financial side of things, what's interesting too is the yield curve reinverted yesterday. What is this? A couple weeks after or the Fed, a few weeks after the Fed officially lowered rates, and it seemed like that was a move to sort of quell the markets, prop up equity markets, but the bond market's really telling a different story, which is we're not buying your bullshit. We think inflation is going to continue to go and the economy is not as well as you're portraying it to be. And the demand.
Yeah, well, all you need to know is this. We got volatility in foreign exchange rates that we haven't seen in decades. With the bank, it started off this August with the Bank of Japan blowing up by raising interest rates 25 basis points. So they have a choice: save their currency from oblivion, or help the global financial markets. And it's getting harder and harder for them to do that. We're seeing Asian indexes like the Chinese A50 and the Hang Seng move, 7-8% in a day down because I guess the stimulus wasn't what people wanted. So we're seeing volatility. Now we have volatility in the bond markets. The yield curve reinverted. I suspect there's just going to be a lot of volatility. No one really knows what's going on. And volatility eventually feeds into the equity stock markets, and that'll cause a deleveraging effect at some point. Again, it's a national security issue, the stock market. And when I say that, it's because you need tax returns are correlated to stock returns, so much the government takes in. So now that we're running, 8 to 10% deficits, you need to have 20% annualized equity returns, or you can't fund it. So the stock market is literally a national security risk for the regime.
Well, the deficit spending, and it's two sides of the same coin, right? Like the stock market is national security, and it's to prop up this insanely bloated federal government. That's the other thing that's been astonishing, particularly the last 2 weeks with the basically unveiling of what FEMA has been directing funds towards for the last year. And I think FEMA, DHS specifically, makes it obvious that we're in looting the treasury stage. Like you have 1 week, we're giving billions of dollars to Lebanon, Israel, Ukraine, and the people of North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida are asking for a pittance of that. And sorry, we can't do that. FEMA's out of money. And then you dig into what FEMA's been giving money to, and it's like literally to import illegal immigrants and place them in cities throughout the country. Like it feels like, I feel comfortable saying it feels like we're under attack as an American people. Like the people in charge are literally attacking the sanctity of the ideals and the structure that this country was built on.
Yeah, I have experience with FEMA from the Maui fires last year. They came to the island and they wanted to take control of everything. So when we tried to get supplies early days to the people in need, there was a lot of there were roadblocks on the Poly Highway, but we figured out a way to get through. We knew people who knew people, and the local cops finally relented because they knew this was nonsense. FEMA wasn't on the ground yet, but they directed the local authorities to block the roads so that they could. I guess what their scam is they need to control everything so that they can then charge people for the government, invoice it, maybe take their own, invoice it, but never really give the money and then take it for themselves. Because my friend, we got supplies to Lahaina in my friend's moving truck. He owns a moving company. We did that ourselves before FEMA showed up. Then FEMA shows up, and about a month and a half, 2 months later, they contact him and say, hey, would you volunteer 2 or 3 trucks and some laborers for us? And he called me and he said, Ed, FEMA wants me to volunteer trucks for free. I said, no. They have a $30 billion budget. They should pay you money for that. And then, we suspected what they do is they get free voluntary resources, and then they charge the government, and who knows what happens to that money. They invoice it. It's a joke.
Yeah, whether it's FEMA or the money going off to these countries for these wars, it's again, it seems like we are squarely in the looting the treasury phase of empire decline. And where is all this money going? You had pictures of Ukrainian officials laying on beds with millions of dollars in USD.
Well, look, Elon said something about, there was a tweet, somebody said, hey, how come we're sending all this money overseas and not directing it internally. And Elon said, good point. And then underneath that tweet, I said, it's easier for kickbacks. It's easier to money launder and get paid through corrupt government. You give money to a corrupt government with a wink, wink, and then they launder it to you. So it's a lot easier to send money overseas to get your cut of the pie. That's why so much money goes overseas. It's a grift. It's been a grift for decades.
Yeah, and it flows back in via these NGOs or whatever.
Yeah,
it may be. Well, going back to Lahaina, what is the aftermath there? I mean, obviously, it was a big headline in the news for a few weeks last year, massive fires, and not much has been said. What's going on in that area? Are the reports of rich people coming in just picking off the land true, or is the community building back up after the town fell to the ground last year?
They're trying to hold on to their properties. It's difficult. There are some people getting picked off because they can't take it anymore. A lot of people moved off the island, and it's the slow roll of disaster capitalism. Just kind of sweat people out until they relent and sell their properties. But so far, it seems like people are holding the line, as far as I can tell. It was, it's going to come out that it was abject local government failure. There was a hurricane 500 miles off the coast of Maui, but that didn't cause the winds that day. The winds were a quote unquote freak weather event that were 70, 80 mile an hour winds that took down power lines. But there were so many things that happened that are very suspicious. The fire hydrants didn't work. There were water rights issues being discussed. The cops blocked roads they shouldn't have. I don't blame the local cops. They were just taking orders. And it just seemed like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And they didn't sound the tsunami alert system, which is also, if you read in the literature of that alert system, it's used for fires and all sorts of other things. They made the determination not to sound the alarm. The official in charge of that resigned due to quote unquote health reasons. So there's a lot of suspicious, weird things that went on that can't be explained. I chalk it up right now to mostly government incompetence. I couldn't find any serious evidence of weather manipulation, although I know that exists, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was either weather manipulation or space lasers. That's what people were going with. Is there any validity to the Blue Ruse holding up?
Well, I will say this. I don't know, but my partner at Finance Technologies, Carlos Alegria, is a PhD physicist. And 25 years ago, right out of his PhD program, he worked for DARPA and was working on directed energy weapons. So the technology is real. So, whether it was employed, I don't know, but it exists and it's not conspiracy theory.
Yeah. A lot of that going on right now. I mean, the hurricanes and what happened with Helene.
Let's talk about the hurricane for a second. Like, I don't know if it's weather manipulation, but I'm just a math guy. I ask Grok some questions. What are the chances of a Category 5 hurricane forming in the Gulf of Mexico, moving east to Tampa? And because of where hurricanes usually form, and because of the nature of the meteorology, it was a 0.1% chance per year. I said, on any given year, what's the chance? It's lower than 0.1%. So if it ends up being a Category 5 hurricane, hopefully it gets downgraded to Category 3. But let's say it's a 5. And we just had a strange hurricane that seemed to intensify over land in North Carolina, devastating that area. You have to say to yourself, well, the odds, I don't know for sure, but the odds suggest that weather manipulation may have been employed. You just got to be a critical thinker and say, I don't know for sure, but this is just weird. These two things would happen 30 days out from one of the most important elections of our lifetime. The other thing, I put out a tweet yesterday. In April, the Biden administration floated the idea of declaring a nationwide climate emergency that would then give them extreme powers. They floated the idea, and wouldn't it be interesting if, like 3 weeks out from the election, they decided to declare a national climate emergency because of these two current events that we're seeing with these hurricanes? that would be a little too suspicious for me. And I said that. I said it wouldn't surprise me if we declare a national climate emergency. They already floated the issue. It's already been talked about. So this isn't conspiracy theory. And if they do, that'll be another prediction I got right just because I know how these people think.
Sup, freaks? This rip of TFTC was brought to you by our good friends at Bitkey. Bitkey makes Bitcoin easy to use and hard to lose. It is a hardware wallet that natively embeds into a 2 or 3 multi-sig. You have one key on the hardware wallet, one key on your mobile device, and Block stores a key in the cloud for you. This is an incredible hardware device for your friends and family, or maybe yourself, who have Bitcoin on exchanges and have for a long time, but haven't taken the step to self-custody because they're worried about the complications of setting up a private public key pair, securing that seed phrase, setting up a PIN, setting up a passphrase. Again, Bitkey makes it easy to use, hard to lose. It's the easiest 0 to 1 step, your first step to self-custody. If you have friends and family on the exchanges who haven't moved it off, tell them to pick up a Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world, use the key TFTC20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That's bitkey.world, code TFTC20. I have a bet with the co-host of the other podcast that I host that the election will not happen. I think there's like a 20% chance right now that the election doesn't actually happen. And whether it's climate emergency, you mentioned the wars that are popping off in the Middle East, obviously escalation between Russia and Ukraine. If NATO starts bombing Russia, things could escalate rather quickly. And that's what it seems like that has to be the last straw that they have. You have a couple of assassination attempts on Trump, and then it seems like the Kamala Harris campaign is completely unraveling in front of the public. That 60 Minutes interview was pretty piss poor, and she was on The View this morning. I saw you tweeting about it. If you say that you watched The View, you just stop there. But it seems like they can't hold her back from the public anymore, and the more she's subjected to public scrutiny, the more it's becoming glaringly obvious that she is not competent to be president. I wouldn't even feel competent with her. Like, as an AJ, it was astonishing that she reached the Attorney General of California at some point in her life too. Well,
she's utterly incompetent. To anybody with eyes to see, it's, if you don't have TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, how you can vote for this woman, I'll never understand. And you are correct. They have to trot her out because the internal numbers that we don't see in the swing states are really bad. So they have to put her out there in the hopes that she might turn the tide. They couldn't hide her any longer. And it's an abject disaster. I mean, The View, 60 Minutes. I mean, on The View, someone asked her, hey, would you change anything that you've done over the last 4 years? And she said she wouldn't. Well, there you go. All you have to ask any voter, how have you been doing the last 4 years? Not good. Well, Kamala just said she wouldn't change anything. Okay, that's interesting. Let me pull the lever for the orange-haired man that I don't like. I mean, that's the only rational decision anybody can make.
Yeah. As a numbers guy, what are the probabilities you're putting on both paths when go down? Trump wins, somewhat of a seamless transition. Do we begin to recover? I guess scenario 2 would be Trump wins, unseamless transition, things get a little crazy, and then Kamala wins, not a seamless transition, or Kamala wins seamless transition. Like, what are the probabilities of those four?
Well, I think Trump is going to win the real numbers. So he's going to win. The question is whether they steal it and can they sell the steal. And if it's overwhelmingly large where they can't steal it, then the next plan is, gin up all sorts of civil war hatred issues and try to get people into the streets for violence. So no matter what happens, there's going to be nothing seamless about anything, in my humble opinion. I mean, there's just no way. There's too much pent up emotional spirits on both sides. A lot of anger and fear, and on both sides, there's a lot of righteous anger on the right. Well, I call it the right, but let's just call it common sense. And there's some people on the right that are idiots, and obviously the left, which is devoid of common sense at this point. And there are a lot of people on the left who are getting the joke and coming over to our side. So the left-right paradigm is even breaking down. So I call it common sense versus insane.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it's just the bubble that I'm in Twitter and the groups I hang out with in Austin, but even my extended family, which is in the Northeast, I think people are waking up and saying, like, this is utterly insane. There's no way that we can continue. And then that's why, like, the hurricane, particularly Helene, I think has opened up a lot of eyes in the last week. You have Asheville, which is one of the liberal outposts of North Carolina, just being completely left to the wayside. You have to imagine there's a number of people in that situation who believed that the government would come and save me if something happened, that are sitting there 2 weeks in and watching the utter incompetence and the lack of resources and money to flow in and actual help outside of Good Samaritans that have rushed in, and they're saying, like, what the hell? Like, is the government actually here to save me?
Right. You have people trying to help being prevented by the government from helping. That says it all. I'm not, the people on the ground doing the FEMA stuff. They're just taking orders and they're minions, but their orders, whatever they are, end up hurting people. They're not helping. And that, like you said, has opened the eyes of many across the nation that one of the basic functions of government is situations like this, is, disaster recovery and rescue. If a government can't do this, what in the hell do we have a government for? This is a basic operation, and they can't seem to get it done right. And it seems to be not only not done right, there seems to be malice involved. Whether it's intentional or just their stupid policies, don't care at this point. It ends up looking like malice.
Yeah, then you have disgusting individuals like David Axelrod saying that this is probably good for the Democrats because that part of Western North Carolina was leaning heavily towards Trump, and they won't be able to vote anymore, or likely won't make it to the polls due to the destruction, which is says something about where his priorities are. And I think a lot of people, a lot of people, not everybody certainly, but a lot of people are thinking that way.
Look, the lack of empathy and humanity in so many of our leaders has been apparent for decades, and now the masks are off. And we had John Kerry and Hillary Clinton come out and say we're going to get rid of the First Amendment because we're losing control. I mean, it's all narcissistic, self-serving nonsense. Axelrod comes out and says this is good for our team, while people and bodies pile up all over the place and people are starving to death. I mean, that's all you need to know about these people. They care only about themselves and their power. They've lost their way. They're not with us in any kind of spiritual sense. They don't believe in God. They believe they are the gods.
They do. And let's white pill run down the scenario where Trump wins, whether it's seamless or unseamless. We get out the other end and we have a new coalition in power. Again, RFK, Tulsi. It seems like this time around Trump is posturing like he's going to be wiser in terms of putting certain individuals in his administration and who he staffs around him. And he's got bold ambitions, particularly from a tax perspective, with high tariffs, low income tax. Like, what do you think will happen if a transition happens and the dust settles and we're moving forward with a second Trump presidency?
Well, unfortunately, he's going to inherit a recession. Whoever wins is going to get a recession because right now they're trying to paper it over, but eventually nature will take its course. So whether that recession turns into a big one or a systemic financial failure, we don't know yet. We'll see what happens. What I do know is that the longer you manipulate markets, the worse the hangover is, and that's what we got. We have three indicators that we're monitoring that are private that have to do with the financial markets, and they're all pinned at statistical extremes to the point where when they mean revert, it's pretty scary. We're at extremes we haven't seen in decades. So whatever's coming, he's going to inherit. Okay, let's put that aside for a second. He gets in office. He makes better decisions about personnel, and he's got RFK. He's got other people, Tulsi, maybe Elon Musk. The problem is this: the bureaucratic state, the administrative state, has for decades operated on the premise that politicians are the summer help and that their agendas run through different administrations, which is kind of true. So there's going to be this big battle between the administrative state and Trump. The administrative state owns the intelligence agencies. So there'll be all sorts of scandals ginned up and investigations and just nonsense. So it'll be kind of a repeat of what happened to Trump after he won. The good news is he's more aware this time, and if he has the key people in the right positions and trusts the right people, he should do better than he did last time. But it's still going to be a battle. It's not going to be a panacea.
Yeah, because especially with that tax policy, if he's going to higher tariffs and lower the income tax, that necessitates a gutting of the administrative state if you want to avoid a highly inflationary scenario. That's what I wonder. Does he get what the Chinese would refer to as a mandate from heaven if he wins by a landslide? And it's essentially like a prop vote for a gutting of this administrative state, a landslide win by Trump. Because I think, again, going to just the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA alone, just put the microscope on that one section of the administrative state, and it's obvious they're completely just wasting taxpayer money. And this is at a time when inflation, yes, the inflation rate is lower, but it's still building on a higher base. People are hurting more than ever. And everywhere American citizens turn, it's just overt wasting of taxpayer dollars, whether that's flying immigrants in, creating a special app that allows you to illegally cross the border and get access to money, housing, opportunities for jobs. That's what I hope, at least, is that a landslide victory is received as somewhat of a mandate to go do all this, because it's going to be completely necessary with that tax policy if he goes and implements it.
I agree. And, look, whatever happens, I think we're going to see a deflationary period, which honestly would be a good thing. We have millennials and people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are priced out of the housing market, they're priced out of the stock market. Asset inflation has really helped the boomers and the very rich. And, a deflation in asset prices, while painful and may cause some bank failures and, for some very rich people go bust, long term, it's a boon for the middle class. So, a correction, while jobs would be lost, long term would be fantastic. And that's the kind of reset we need. The problem is they're going to try to usher in a reset with global central bank digital currency and UBI and scare the hell out of everyone.
Do you think they'll be able to successfully do that? I don't think, because when it comes to CBDC, I don't think they're smart enough to implement it. I think it's too much of a... I don't think it's going to fly. I think, one thing I have a friend who's involved in the gold business right now, and they did an experiment. They went through Latin America traveling with dollars, local currencies, Bitcoin, gold, silver, and interestingly enough, cash is still king when you want to buy things. So if they try to take away cash, I think there'll be an outcry. Yeah, we've already seen it last 6-7 years. I think 7 years, going back to probably less than that. India, Lebanon, Nigeria, Israel came out and said they're going to remove the 200 shekel note from their economy. But every time this tries to be implemented, where it's India, Lebanon, Nigeria to date, we'll see whether or not Israel does it. It's complete chaos. And I think Nigeria is the first country to try to implement a CBDC, and it's just completely fallen flat on its face.
I think Thailand tried one linked to a UBI. It was a CBDC linked to a UBI, and I don't think that went well either, apparently.
Yeah. Which is obviously, we're Team Bitcoin over here. I will acknowledge that cash is king, though, wherever you go, particularly in the emerging world.
Yeah, that's what I was talking. Down in Latin America, cash is still king, especially the U.S. dollar. You can do anything with the U.S. dollar down south.
Yeah, and even in the world of cryptocurrencies, they prefer stable coins down there to Bitcoin because they can't stomach the price volatility. It makes sense. If you don't have money to save and you need to spend your money as quick as you get it, you probably want it in a stable coin. But yeah, it'll get interesting. Like, what do you think the Fed needs to do? Like, what do you think this economic recession, this economic instability that seems to be on the horizon forces the Fed and the Treasury to do? Like how big do you think the balance sheet gets?
Well, that's what we don't know. So they just cut 50 basis points, and now the yield curve re-inverted. So again, people think inflation's coming hard and fast. I actually think inflation is slowing. It's still, like you said, up a ton. The rate of growth is slowing. I think the yield curve will re-invert again in a month or two or whenever. But the Fed is probably likely going to continue rate cuts. Maybe they pause because of what the yield curve just did, and the manufactured employment number. But the real economy is slowing. You see it everywhere. I mean, here on Maui, just local. Again, real estate's local, but pending sales are at the lowest they've ever been. And I'm hearing about things going on in Florida and condo markets. So you can feel the real economy is continuing to restrict, especially right before the election. No one is greenlighting any big projects until they know who the president is. So we're going to have a hangover from this lack of investment. And so I think the Fed will end up probably cutting. There might be, obviously have to do QE again. They might do yield curve controls. It depends on how bad it gets. And again, and there's two ways this can go. A la 2000 top, where the stock market went down 50% over 2 years into 2002, or a great financial crisis with speed. Speed is what kills. So if I'm the powers that be, I want to manage this deflation, but when you manipulate as much as you have, you can't control price on the way down if you pumped it up too high, which is what they've done.
Yeah. I mean, just anecdotally here in Austin, we were one of the cities that benefited most from the COVID boom, people escaping California, New York, other parts of the country to come here. They've got, I think, 9 cranes building high rises in the city, in the south part of the city, and a bunch of construction that is ground to a halt. They literally have the main road up down where I'm at into the city. They have like construction. They've had construction basically set up for 2 months, and they haven't done. There has been one construction worker. They've cut it down to 1 lane, which is very frustrating because it's like a major artery into the city, and traffic has been horrendous. But they literally have not had one construction worker doing anything, but they've had this lane shut off for 2 months now. And
yeah, we track building permits, and they've been going south since the beginning of the year, and that's usually a leading indicator. That's a great leading indicator, building permits.
Yeah, as a young millennial who hasn't bought a house yet, I'd actually welcome this.
That is some. I was on one of your maybe our competitor friend Natalie Brunell, and I said that. I said, look, a crash is nothing to be scared of if you have money in a bank and you don't own anything. It's great. I mean, or Bitcoin or wherever your assets reside. If prices come down 20-30% in homes and you haven't bought yet, one person's pain is another person's gain. And millennials are not, by and large, aren't as big of the homeowner community as the boomers. So, I think net it's a good thing. You get people in the homes that are starting young families, and that's always good for the economy. All the spending and investment that comes out of owning a home. It's better than BlackRock and Blackstone buying all these homes privately and then renting them out. I mean, turning people into renters is no way to really jumpstart the economy.
No. Do you think they can get caught offsides on this trade, on that massive trade they've been building up for the last, I guess, better part of a decade now?
Oh, I think they will. They're always too optimistic. Only really smart people get out at the top, and they're still in it. They're still doing it, and they'll lose their shirts. But again, they've made so much money personally. It doesn't matter. They're investors. You got to remember, private equity. You got the partners that take. It's basically 2 and 20, 2% fees, 20% carry on the returns annually. So they've amassed for themselves personally billions of dollars. And then when this goes south, they'll lose some money, but it's their investors who will lose. All the pension funds that are in these private equity firms will lose their shirts. but these people will still have billions that they're sitting on top of. It's one of the greatest business models ever. You get a 2% fee, which is huge. I mean, huge just to have the money sit there in your investments, and then you get 20% of any profits you make. And it's been a bull market for private equity for 20 years since the great financial crisis. So we've created these billionaires who really just, by the nature of their seat, have created massive dynastic wealth for themselves, not because they've done anything particularly wonderful for the world other than financial wizardry.
Yeah, and it's important to note too, it's like 2% per year. So if you raise like $100 million fund and it's a 10-year fund lifestyle, I think you're going to get $20 million out of that as a manager.
That's the same thing in the venture capital community. After the 2000, but right before the 2000 bubble, VCs were killing it because of all the .com public offerings. That's when they monetize when they do a public offering. And so then there was a flood, like always, after the great returns in the VC community asset size exploded after the good returns. And so what ended up happening is after the .com crash, these VCs, you raise $1 billion fund, you got three or four guys, and you clip 2% a year, and then you invest in it. And even if you don't have a home run, off $1 billion, you're getting 2% a year with three or four guys. It's not a bad business, even if you don't even make any money for your investors, because you lock these people in for 10 years.
Yeah. To be clear, I'm a VC myself, but we're dedicated to actually making money for our investors. Our funds are performing well right now, and we like to think the area that we're focused on in Bitcoin is very underappreciated right now. And it is fun. We don't like to refer to ourselves as VCs because of that connotation that we've just described there. But there has been a complete lack of fiduciary responsibility that has existed in like Silicon Valley VC world for the better part of the decade. I mean, if you look at vintages from 2021, 2022, they raise obscene amounts of money and are just throwing it at these SaaS companies that probably aren't going to make too much money at the end of the day, especially if the narrative behind AI plays out and people are able to replace these SaaS products internally.
Well, there's two types of VCs. There's VCs that are real, but there's also, and I met these types when I lived in Boston, they're Harvard Business School graduates who are great salespeople and talk a good game, wouldn't know how to pick a good investment if it hit them, but they raise money and they're clipping big fat coupons, and there's a lot of those funds lying around. There
are. It's speaking of which, though, like it's actually a good segue into. Interested to get your thoughts, and I'm not sure if you've heard the conversations around elite theory leading up to this election. It seems like Trump, with Vance on his ticket, particularly Elon behind him, and many others in Silicon Valley consider themselves little tech, are seeing this election and the Trump ticket particularly as a way to basically take over power and sort of push the uniparty, military industrial, pharma industrial complex to the wayside and have this new elite come in that are more efficient in positioning themselves as builders who can actually get shit done. Are you buying into this at all, or do you think it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss?
Well, I put out a tweet right after, I think a while ago, I think after the first assassination attempt or right before, where I said, look, someone has to say it, so I'll say it. Trump is being infiltrated by, I think, the other side, because I think it was after Biden stepped down. I said, they're worried about the populism and the MAGA movement. And to really implement your policies, you have to co-opt the MAGA movement. What better way to do it than through Trump? So I said, I'm not saying it's happening. I say you have to watch for it. So if there's a new elite, rah-rah team comes in, we have to watch what they do, know what they say, judge people by their fruit. So like right now, I think their intentions are good, but I'm not going to sit there and become team Trump, Elon, Vance just for the heck of it. If they start going sideways, I'm going to call them out right away.
Yeah, that's what I worry about. Is everybody's getting there? I'm cautiously optimistic.
Same.
Particularly, I mean, for our initiative, if we get if Kamala was earnest this morning on The View when she said, I want to change anything, like for our industry, that would be terrible. Like if she gets in, they continue Operation Choke Point 2.0 and this basically signaling out of the Bitcoin and broader digital asset industry, it's not great for us. I mean, we'll survive, but it has been an uphill battle fighting incompetent regulators, and I would actually say malicious regulators and malicious administration, particularly targeting us. And that's why I'm cautiously optimistic. Trump and others within his campaign have been posturing like they would like to embrace Bitcoin and make sure that America leads moving forward. But I've been tricked again. It feels like I was always one of those, just vote harder, like making fun of people who voted harder. But and it's funny how this happens. Like you get lead up to the election, it does feel like systemically important to back one side over the other, and cautiously optimistic, but also preparing for a letdown if it materializes.
What you have to watch is when change comes, there's lots of details and there's tremendous amount of work that goes into writing any legislation. And this is where the uniparty can insert their influence, putting in clauses that no one understands, that no one reads. So it's unfortunately we're going to have to watch everything that Trump, if he wins, what he does like a hawk, just to make sure there's no hidden back doors.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what happened the first administration. He didn't realize he was putting bad people in that were just, whether it's Bolton or whoever, Mnuchin at the Treasury Secretary. Like
Mnuchin, skull and bones. Yeah. I mean, you just can't make this up.
No. That's why I would love to see RFK take over the FDA. So what do you think if Trump wins? What do you think RFK's position will be? And do you think we will get justice or retribution for the con that was the COVID lockdowns and the vaccination rollouts?
I think he's going to be on the transition team, which is good. So he's going to help with vet personnel. Whether it becomes the head of one of the agencies, I believe there's a congressional approval process. And so that might be difficult unless Trump can, carry other states and elections to give the GOP a majority. But the congressional approval process might be a problem, but it shouldn't be. I mean, I'd love to see him the head of the FDA or NIH or DHS or not DHS, but something meaningful in the health part of the CDC, whatever.
And do you think that will lead to justice, or do you think that's going to have to come from the private sector?
Well, so we need the DOJ on board for that. We need to open up investigations. There's a lot of there. I mean, this is the problem has been that I've always said this is a meta fraud. It was so big. It involved the government, the pharmaceutical industry, large tech, and the media companies. They all profited from this big COVID debacle and the pushing of the vaccines. So there's so many vested interests and that don't want to see any justice because there's too many people implicated. Whether you're a useful idiot or you're in on it, I don't know. But there were so many things that were done illegally that it's almost like no one wants to look.
What should they be looking at though, specifically? Because it's been last July I looked it up, was the last time we talked. So it's 14 months. Fauci's come out and somewhat admitted that the shots could lead to myocarditis in people. You had the FOIA requests that showed that they were openly telling people to take communication outside their official government email addresses and coordinating, particularly during the early days. Ethical Skeptic has been, continuing to post his data on excess mortality. Like, is it becoming more obvious, and is it as bad as it was, the trends, particularly of excess mortality last year when we last spoke?
The trends have come down because the booster uptake is way down. So the immediate deaths that you can link directly to the vaccine have come down. And we're running around 5 to 10% excess mortality on a run rate, which is still, remember, 10% excess mortality in working age people is a once in a 200-year flood. So it's still going on. It peaked at 40% in 2021 in working age people. So the good news is it's come down. The bad news is, the medium to long term effects are just coming to light. And we've been tracking some of them. We've showed excess cancers in the UK and the US, obviously cardiovascular issues, but now there's neurological issues, musculoskeletal issues, skin issues, liver issues, blood issues. There's all sorts of problems. So we kind of think that we're going to be running at a 5 to 10% for a while. And by the way, Swiss Re, one of the Swiss reinsurance companies, said the same thing. But of course, they said it's due to COVID and you need to take your vaccines. So, their numbers and our numbers match.
And it's not even, they're not even talking about like an uptake COVID season anymore. Or people even, I don't even think they're not even pretending to be worried about it anymore, which is interesting.
I think people aren't even testing for it. I mean, I had dinner with my high school age daughter on Sunday, and she was recovering from a sickness. I said, "Did you have COVID?" She's like, "I don't know." she just didn't care. I think that's kind of the attitude. If people are so over it, but what we do know is we came up with 3 categories. Obviously, the dead, the disabled, and the injured. And the injured are comprised of individuals with a compromised immune system. The science has come we proved that there was something going on with the workforce. Their absence rates and work time loss were way up. So we assumed that they were getting sicker, and they were. And the science has come out that IgG4 is actually turned off by the spike protein, which kind of turns off your immune system. So people are immunocompromised, and that leads to just kind of chronic sickness. Maybe not life-threatening, but you're working at 70% speed most of the year.
What's the latest on the fertility, the effects this has on fertility?
Well, so that's an area that we have as a pending project. We're waiting for time to go by because the problem with fertility, unlike excess mortality, death rates are pretty steady and constant and could be measured. Birth rates do fluctuate. And so we couldn't get a signal, but fertility and birth rates have come down. We need more time. If they stay down, that's called persistence, and then we can say that there's a new trend. So statistically, we need a little more time, but using common sense, we're hearing about it all over the place.
Yeah, that's another worry. There's just birth rates, whether or not it's affected by this directly, and it's multifaceted. It's affected by that. Social
multifactorial, multifactorial for sure.
Yeah. That's what I worry about is, particularly for millennials, Gen Z, is having kids and starting a family. A lot of people that I know are delaying it. There's probably like 15 to 20% of my college friends have children, and probably the same rate across high school friends as well. It's not good out there.
No, and another trend, anecdotal only. I'm a Gen Xer, and I hang out with a lot of millennials, and I noticed a lot of them, well before COVID, have gotten on TRT, and they had low testosterone. I just thought, in my generation, I didn't really encounter anybody that was on TRT. So there seems to be a testosterone problem that's probably caused by vaccine schedule increasing. I didn't take that many. I was born in 67. But, if you're born after 86, 87, and even later, you've got more and more vaccines. It's probably also food issues, environmental issues. But low testosterone seems to be a problem in the younger age group that I've anecdotally just seen. Because, again, I know 3 people who are on TRT personally. And not for bodybuilding.
Just to get their T up.
They were running at such low energy and had slight depression. And literally, when they got their T checked, it was low 2s. It's
insane. That's why you got to get your sun and your steel, freaks. Get out there, lift some weights, get some sun, eat well. It's a big problem. We've talked about this off air, but I feel comfortable bringing it up. But it's like almost biblical in terms of, it feels like, again, whether you want to call it empire decline, but it's more of a spiritual battle as well. It feels like, hopefully, who knows, things could get worse. Maybe they do get worse, but it doesn't feel like it can get much lower than it is right now. If you just look at socioeconomic situation of many people out there, the culture of speed, not even speed dating, app dating, OnlyFans, degenerate gambling. Like, it feels like people will look back in retrospect 100 years from now and be like, it's very similar to what the Weimar Republic was going through. It feels like we're definitely in this good versus evil spiritual battle.
Yeah, there seems to be at the base root of it, and this DEI and the woke culture. It's all about victimhood and not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others, which is a spiritual sickness in and of itself. And it manifests, like you said, into narcissism, OnlyFans, lots of overweight people, wondering why no one wants to date them. It's just there's just this phenomenon of entitlement and victimhood that I've never seen before in my life.
How do you think we turn the tide on that? You think we just need to
Well,
bring toxic masculinity back and start making fun of people? Do we need to bring bullying back to a certain degree?
Well, I think it's just cycles, right? So the saying, hard times create good men or strong men. Good times create weak men create bad times. I think this whole woke nonsense and this victimhood, if things get, really bad where we're, in an economic depression and wars and food scarcity, your pronouns won't matter. And that just kind of corrects itself.
Yeah. Do you think food scarcity is on the table?
Well, look at what's going on. We got inflation. We got weather issues all of a sudden. We got if we start having wars, then we won't have trade. And it just seems to me that food is going to become a problem.
Are you worried about the grid at all?
Oh, absolutely. I used to be electric utility analyst at Donaldson, Lufkin and Genret. The grid is a disaster. We've experienced decades and decades of underinvestment in the grid. That's one issue. Then, we saw, we talked about what could derail the election. One of the things we didn't mention was a cyber attack, quote unquote, cyber attack from Iran. I mean, we already, what is that?
It's your iMac settings. If you go, it won't work for me, but if you put your thumbs up, you get a thumbs up too.
Oh, wow. That's pretty wild. If we get we saw CrowdStrike take down the internet. That, some people said that was a beta test. Who knows? But what I do know is the intelligence agencies have floated the idea of a cyber attack. AP and Reuters came out earlier at the end of last year that a global financial crisis could be affected by a ghost in the machine. So there's already floating of, and the WEF, Klaus Schwab famously said 3 years ago, a cyber pandemic. So expect it. I don't think it would be Iran or a bunch of hackers in Russia. I think it would be our own deep state using it for their own purposes.
Yeah, it was funny. The one of the headlines I caught earlier this week or last week was it became apparent to the FBI that Chinese, quote unquote, Chinese hackers have been sitting within telecom industry companies for years, just gathering data. And it wasn't because they actually hacked the system. It's because they just used the back doors that the FBI forced the telecom companies to put in place in the first place. And that's whether it's utilities companies, telecom, whatever it may be. Like, these systems are all systemically fragile and vulnerable. So it doesn't have to be a China or Iran. Like, everybody, not everybody, but people in power, particularly in the intelligence agencies, know where these vulnerabilities exist because they forced the companies to put them there in the first place. And so, easy scapegoat if they wanted to go that route. And I
think we also have a national internet kill switch that can be, the president can, do that. I believe there's such capability. They've never used it, but there is a kill switch, I think. Look, when I was growing up, movies in Hollywood would depict the government as this, super sophisticated, always knowing what's going on, come to the rescue, all these movies, these patriotic movies. the reality is the government's incompetent and has been for a long time. And it's just, because of the information flow and the whistleblowers that are coming to light, we're now getting a bird's eye view into how bad it's been forever.
And it's a good thing. That's what I mean. Keep Hillary away from that kill switch, because she would hit it in a second given the opportunity. But that's the, again, double-edged sword, things in parallel. It's hilarious too to watch their incompetence get laid bare on social media, and it's somewhat cathartic, because that is one of the only ways that we're going to turn the page and get away from these kleptocratic, insane people, is to literally make fun of them. They are incompetent. They are stupid. They do not care about you. And you have this perception of them being the saviors that they were in the movies of the 80s, but reality is much different. They're way out of their depth, and it's time for them to hopefully gracefully walk off exit stage left and just let us solve the problems by ourselves. And that's like the last 2 weeks in North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Like, I think that's another white pill out of all this. It's like that may be their biggest fear, is the individual citizens proving that they could save themselves and actually don't need the government to do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The people running a lot of these departments don't even know what's going on. I remember a couple months ago, in August, when we had the downward revision in the payroll report of like 890,000 jobs. I think the Secretary of Commerce, was being interviewed, and she said Trump's lying, and the woman said, "These are your own numbers," and she said,
"She didn't know what the Bureau of Labor Statistics is."
That was the funniest thing I ever saw in my life. She's not familiar with the BLS, that resides underneath the Department of Commerce. Can't make this up. And then there was another guy, I think a Chamber of Commerce guy in the U.S. government. Somebody couldn't even describe how money is made and printed and how the
no, he didn't understand how treasuries. He didn't understand how treasuries were issued.
Yeah, he didn't know. So these are the people we got running the show. They're incompetents.
Yeah, hopefully we can get them out of our lives. They do want to hold on to power, which is what I worry about.
I mean, the good news is when Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, and a host of others come out and say we need to get rid of the First Amendment, we've pretty much won. It's just a question of what their reaction is. It's an admission that we've won. I mean, that's the good news. Like they can't keep control anymore, and that's an admission.
Yeah. We just got to keep having these conversations, keep getting the message out there, because I do think people are waking up to it. And there's no better shock to the system for the individual than economic strife. And for millennials and Gen Z, it's very strong. And it's not only economic, it's social. Like, there's a lot of men and women out there who can't find a partner, can't start a family. And I'm saying particularly millennials my age that haven't made that transition to family formation. They're beginning to get very stressed out, very angry and frantic almost.
Well, unfortunately, it's better for men because we don't have the clock that women do, so we can start family formation later in life. I feel for the women that find themselves in their 40s and 50s who never married.
Yeah, you can feel some of the millennial girls hearing that clock tick louder and louder. It's like the movie Hook, and it's sad. It's really sad to watch, and it goes back to the incentives of the system. I think millennials, particularly Gen Z to a certain extent, were just sold this complete lie: go to college, get a degree, go into debt, get a job. If you're a girl, be a girl boss. If you're a boy, work your way up the corporate ladder. And that's just led to a ton of misery and bad financial outcomes for a lot of people. It was not bad financial outcomes, it's bad social outcomes.
Yeah, if you look at the fourth turning literature, the millennial generation was supposed to be the hero generation as we go into the fourth turning. I don't know that this is speculation on my part, but given what happened to millennials, I feel like it was the powers that be knew that they would be the hero generation and purposely corrupted that generation.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah.
I mean, pure speculation, but there's a lot of great millennials. I hang out with mostly millennials, and they're great people with the same values that I have. So it's not like everybody's all the same, and I don't like to disparage a whole group, but it's certainly it's been a generation that was characterized, I think, unjustly, but there's some truth to it.
Yeah, I guess I was born in early '90s, so I think I'm smack dab in the middle of the millennial generation. And I think what I'm at least noticing is that, at least in my cohort, early 90s millennials are getting to the point of like, holy shit, we were fucking lied to, and people are getting very pissed off. And on top of that, there's never been an easier time to basically exit the system, whether that's via Bitcoin or creating a business. The software tools that you have and the ability to bootstrap has never been cheaper and easier. And I think people are beginning to wake up and be like, all right, let's go build our way out of this. And we've reached the point, particularly post-COVID, where many people, not all, some are still stuck in the matrix and consumed by mass media and the political system. But many people are saying, all right, it's time for something new. And that's what I love about the Bitcoin industry. It's a bunch of people who are taking agency and saying, let's not fight this tide. Let's go build something outside of this system and work towards solutions. And that's the other thing. It's a complete culture of victimhood, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like problem, doom scroll. And very few people, at least for a while, were focused on solutions, which is why I like talking to you, is you do a great job of highlighting the problem and providing potential solutions. And we just need more of that in today's day and age more than ever, is stop complaining. Yeah. Have a way out of this, like focus on solutions.
Yeah. There's a lot of hope. I mean, like I said, if stocks go down 50, 60% and home prices go down 30, that's great for some people, bad for others, but that's the generation below, which are not asset owners, can become asset owners, and they should become asset owners, because then that would reinvigorate the economy. It really would.
I would love nothing more than for interest rates to drop, the housing market to crash despite that, and to lock in a house at a 40% discount at low interest rates for 30 years. I'm looking for a forever home, Ed. And the opportunity may be on the horizon.
Yeah. And, the other thing is there needs to be a new mindset. When I was a young wee kid, my grandparents lived in the same house, and it was just a 1,500 square foot house, and it raised a family of three. Home sizes need to come down. Unless you're uber wealthy, but if you're like on a salary, you don't need a 2,500 square foot house. It's like, what do you need to be happy? And that's we need to build a ton of 1,500 square foot homes. We need more supply. That's another problem. We don't have enough incentives to build new homes. There's 30% red tape that eats into the cost of the home. So every home has got 30% of red tape built into it. If we get rid of the red tape, home prices drop 30%. And we need to build millions and millions of, World War II style, 3-bedroom homes, maybe with a bedroom down in the basement. This is what we need to do. Like go back to basics.
I shared a room with my brother for 18 years. It's not a bad way to grow up. It's a little awkward in your teenage years when you're going through puberty, but you get through it. It's
yeah.
And that's the other. I wonder if Chevron deference will actually have an effect on that red tape, because a lot of you have to be LEED certified. What's that come from? EPA regulation.
Yeah, I think that will. But Trump has actually highlighted the red tape, and I think he would want to get rid of that. So RFK had a plan for stimulating homes for young folks. We agreed with the sentiment, but we disagreed with how he wanted to do it, because he wanted the home prices right now are like 7 times income, the average income. We need to get them down to at least 5, maybe even lower. But so the only way to do that is to build more homes. It's simple, and cut regulation. Cut regulation, build more.
No, you just give everybody $25,000 to buy their first house, and prices come down.
No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
It is insane that was like the core of her economic policies. Like, I'm just going to give you all $25,000 to buy your first house.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Immediately raise the home price $45,000 right then and there. It's the most. It's the dumbest idea. My favorite was the taxing unrealized gains. That would devastate the middle class. Would be wiped out. The rich could figure out ways to get around it, but the middle class would get your 401k goes up, or not 401k. Let's say you just had $1 million. Oh yeah, sorry. You had $1 million in stocks other than your 401k, and they went up to 1.2 million. Kamala would want, I think it was 25% of your unrealized gains. So then you'd have to take out, if you didn't want to sell them, you'd have to take out a loan to pay that tax.
Yeah, and
great for bankers, by the way. Great for bankers.
A lot of fees.
Yeah.
And the rich, even if they can't get out, they're going to still have to pay that tax, and they would start a cascading sell-off.
Oh yeah, no, it would start a panic in the stock markets for sure.
I mean, that's. Are we in a bubble? Because those two policies alone, unrealized capital gains tax, and we're just going to give you $25,000 a piece to buy a house. It's so economically illiterate. How can people not see that? And that's going back to culture thing, this whole demonization of the rich, which obviously they're are certainly very bad and greedy, and rich people have gotten their wealth through nefarious means, but most rich people are actually good people who built businesses and deserve the money that they've made. And this whole demonization, that's the sad part, is that the people who are dependent on the democratic welfare state really believe that the rich are the enemy, when it's not. It's actually that welfare state is what's oppressing you and preventing you from actually climbing the economic ladder.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a bubble in idiocy in policies right now. I mean, I've never seen such economic illiterate policies come out of anyone's mouths. The other one was raise the corporate tax rate to 28%, which would make us one of the highest in the global economy. And what that would do is, corporate taxes are a tax on production, so that would cause inflation to go up. Number one, that'd be immediate effect. Number two, it would cause capital to leave the U.S. and go to cheaper domiciles. So, if you had a project to build if you're a multinational corporation, you had a project to build some capacity in the U.S., you'd be like, nope, and you'd move it somewhere else. And so that would be less jobs ultimately for the middle class.
That's a great way to fund the cartels. You just move it all to Mexico and benefit down there. Ed, it's always a pleasure. We shouldn't wait 14 months between recordings next time.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll do one post-election.
We should, because and hopefully, God willing, it's not a depressing one, because.
Look, I hope he wins, and then there's a lot of controversy. That's the best outcome for us. The worst outcome is he wins, they steal it, and then they try to gaslight us, and there's chaos.
Yeah, that chaos is not going to. I mean, it's still blasphemy to say, but last election, it was mind-boggling that anybody had any sense of probability, particularly with that overnight vote jump, if they did it again. And that's, I mean, to their credit, they've done a really good job the last 4 years beating the January 6th narrative, maybe in preparation for potential election steal this time around, where it's oh, you guys are in Jan 6ers again, are you?
Look, the election was stolen. Statistically, the way the votes came in is absolutely improbable. Anybody in the quant world, now quants aren't generally brave people, but if you talk to them privately, especially on Wall Street, they're like, yeah, that was rigged. But they wouldn't say anything about it because they're not the bravest of souls.
Yeah. Well, luckily you're a brave soul. You're here. Not afraid to speak the truth to people.
That's my nature. I don't like people telling me what to do. That's just a problem of mine. That's how I'm wired.
Kindred spirits there. I've just gotten me not in trouble, but we need more of that.
We probably have similar family upbringings. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, well, it's that, and then it's obviously if you go back to Soviet Russia, who was it? Stolonetsky was literally live not by lies. That's how you ended up in that communist hellholes. People were just repeating the lies and refusing to speak out against them.
Yep, and there was a time on Wall Street when my job as an analyst and a portfolio manager was to get to the truth and figure out stuff before everybody else. Now, unfortunately, fundamental investing is only 5% of the daily volume in the stock markets. It's mostly algos and quants. So the search for truth and getting ahead of corporate fraud or corporate earnings explosion kind of went the way of the dodo bird. And I applied my skills to the real world, and it seems to be, some people seem to find it helpful. All I'm doing is just doing what I did on Wall Street, just applying it to, COVID, the macroeconomic situation, because the fraud is now so big that we're lying about government numbers now.
Yeah. And we do have a new last question of the show, but I think you already answered it. And I think deflation is that, but it is, what is a bold prediction or idea you have that most people in your industry would disagree with?
Oh, let me think. Deflation is so right now, the way the system's built, it causes inflation. They raise interest rates, then credit and debt are money. So when credit starts to contract after you raise interest rates, it causes the money supply to go down, and then it creates a deflationary cycle. So we will have a deflationary cycle. The question is, what do the monetary masters do in response to it? Or do they try to paper it over and never let it happen by creating another war or COVID-like spending? So it's inflate or die. The system is designed for inflationary booms and deflationary busts. The question is, what's next? And we think deflation is, unfortunately, a very bad period of it is coming. And I think that's controversial. Most people think I'm insane.
Yeah, most people think we're going into melt-up territory, particularly with the Fed's movements. But anybody out there listening, if you're in the Fed, the Treasury, just let the deflation happen. Don't start another war. Don't start another COVID. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Let prices reset.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Just rip it off. It's just been, we're going on 12 or more than that, 16 years now since '08. It's time to rip it off. Please don't start more wars.
Well, the great deflation really started after the '00 bubble, and the velocity of money has been trending down since then into the 2020 low. Interestingly enough, the immigration, this 20 million illegal aliens that they're handing benefits to, the velocity of money started rising again. So that not only do they want new voters, this is also to stave off the demographic issues in the U.S. and reinflate the economy. Even though it's lower wages, it will lower wages. It increases the velocity of money. So immigration is net always especially illegal immigration is always net a inflationary event. So there's all, when you look at anything that's going on, you can tie it back to the economy. And the immigration serves a multitude of purposes: potential mercenary army down the line, cheap labor, and reinflate the economy by handing them bennies that they spend immediately.
Yeah, it's crazy. Illegal immigrants coming in. Here's $10,000 on a debit card. Go spend it.
Yep.
On anything
and
you want.
And the velocity, and they're not, they're coming from a land of scarcity. So their mindset is, I'm going to spend this while I got it. And so that velocity, they're not sitting there like, I'm going to make this last a year. They burn through that right away.
Yeah. It's almost like we need to fix the money, making sure you can't just print money and give it away to illegal immigrants.
The system is inherently a war monetary. It's a war chaos system. It's built into the system. It's just built into it. It's, you need major events to justify spending to keep the whole thing going.
That's why we Bitcoin. You take that power of the lever away from them,
That's God bless you.
All right. We'll end it there, Ed. Ed, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. It sounds like your lawn's going to be perfect when you get out there.
I'm sorry about that. The landscaper comes.
It's okay. I usually record in the summers at my beach house, and the show has become famous because there's been multiple times where I've had to ask my neighbor to stop mowing his lawn so I can finish the recording. So I know what it's like.
Yeah, Hopefully it wasn't too bad for your audience.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't bad at all. I didn't actually hear it. I saw him in the background at one point. Ed, thank you. Keep crushing it, and we'll catch up after the election.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Thanks, Marty. Great seeing you again.
All right. Peace and love, freaks.